have to wear different hats depending on where we are. That's just what it means to live in a global society, especially one that's mobile, right? But my invitation to people is that's okay to wear different hats. Just don't let somebody else dictate to you what authenticity looks like. Because if I'm Puerto Rican in one space and I'm New Yorker in another space, but I'm Afro-Latino in another space, and I'm American in another space, I can be all of those things.
Mm-hmm. It's okay.
But it's okay. But you don't get to tell me what I am. I get to...
Ladies and gentlemen, you're welcome back to another insightful episode of the Curious Tycoon Podcast. This is where ambition meets identity, culture, and the stories that shape who we truly become. Today's guest is someone whose life sits at the powerful intersection of arts education, Latino identity, language, immigration, and community leadership, featured in the acclaimed documentary Mad Hot Ballroom. And he is the author of the forthcoming memoir, I Don't Speak Spanish, but I Understand Everything When I'm Dancing. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not all about me. Please permit me to welcome Mr. Rodney Eric López. Hello, Rodney. You're welcome.
Hello, Chucks. How are you? I'm so happy to be with you, and I'm grateful to be on this podcast and just talk with you.
It's my absolute pleasure to have you on, Rodney. How are you doing today? How has the weather been? How is New York? And what's going on?
I'm doing well. At the time of this recording, it is mid-April in New York City, and if you are familiar with the weather in the northeastern United States at this time of year, it is very mercurial. One day it feels like summer, another day it feels like winter, and we are going through that up and down period. I just celebrated my birthday 3 days ago on Monday, so I'm very excited to be celebrating another year of life. Saying my birthday, unlike when your birthday is in the middle of the winter or the middle of the summer, you know what you're going to get. When your birthday's in the spring, like, you don't know, you could have a day out in the park or you could be miserable with a coat and gloves on. So I'm happy and I'm looking forward to the upcoming summer season.
Guess what, Rodney? So we're supposed to record just before Easter, isn't it? And we had to postpone. Guess what? My birthday was actually on Holy Saturday, so the 4th of April, that was my birthday. So we're both April babies.
We're both April babies. All right, happy belated birthday to you too.
Thank you so much. How was the celebration, by the way? How was it?
Oh, I had a fantastic, my wife and I, we celebrated, we combined my birthday actually with the launch of my book. We launched my book on my birthday. So we had a sort of a combined book birthday launch, and it was fantastic. My house was filled with friends and family that I've had for decades, and it was a beautiful celebration. So I was definitely blessed to enjoy my birthday.
That is wonderful. That's wonderful. I mean, that's what we always look forward to, these celebrations. Obviously we're going to go through the book, as we talk today. Let me start here, right? Let me start with some icebreakers like I normally do. If someone knew nothing about you except your book title, what would they misunderstand, and what would they get right about you?
I think if they didn't know me, but all they knew was my book title, I think they might think that what I'm trying to say or who I'm trying to be is I'm trying to say that maybe dance is somehow more important than speaking a language, or that language somehow is problematic. And that's not what I want people to get from me. I want people, as they read it, I know we'll talk about it in a few minutes, we'll get into the content, but like this idea that dance is language. That's what I want people to understand, is dance is a different kind of language. And that we may carry baggage because we speak the language of our home country, or maybe we don't. We might want to be able to pass it on to our children. Maybe we can't do that. Maybe we've come from somewhere else, we've emigrated or we've migrated from another country, and the dominant culture, right, is making life difficult for us, but that we can still find joy in our culture through the arts. And so it'll be interesting to see as this time progresses and we have these conversations, that how people respond. But I just hope that what people learn about me is that I'm somebody who cares deeply about people finding joy through movement and through connection.
I mean, I think there's something I can just oppose that with the popular saying, isn't it, that communication is not all about our words. It's also about our expression, what we're doing. That actually says more than what we actually say. So, I mean, I guess dancing is another form of expression. So, I do agree with that point, really. Personally, I don't have any sort of issues with that. So we're gonna get into it, But another question for you: you've built a career around obviously dance, education, and identity. Which one found you first? Is it the artist, the educator, or the cultural bridge builder?
Okay, that's a great question. So if I'm talking about my life, right, I mean, clearly the arts found me first, because I think all of us as human beings, when we're born and when we're children, we, our mothers, they sing to us. Our homes are filled with music. Maybe there's, in my case, there was dancing, there was music on the radio. My father was a he was a salsa musician on the side. And so I grew up with hearing my father play drums at home. He played congas and he played tambora, that's not what he did for a living, but it's what he did at night, even before I was born. So in a way, I grew up in a musical family. I grew up in a family that respected and appreciated music and dance. But professionally, I didn't get that until many years later. And so, because dance was not something you did for a job, right? That was not, like if you went into the arts, that was like you were assuming a life of poverty, because how many people actually can make a career in the arts? And so my first career was in public relations, corporate public relations. And so I went to school. I wanted to be a journalist. I wanted to be the Puerto Rican Bryant Gumbel. I wound up going into public relations and nonprofit, and then corporate PR. I went into nonprofit leadership and did all the other things. But salsa found me, and then I became an arts educator. So in a way, my career found its way back to the arts, even though I didn't plan it that way. I found my way there because there was a pull, there was a call, and clearly I had a purpose to serve in the arts.
So basically, you've done that full circle thing, isn't it?
That's right.
Yeah, it's always good for people to have something that drives them, a passion that they can always go back to after maybe working in or major corporations or all these things like that, isn't it? Tell us a little bit about that passion and sort of how much do you love it? How much do you love the dancing itself? Just in a few words before I go into some other things.
Yeah, when I'm dancing, when I'm actually physically doing the dancing, I love it. It takes you to another place. Because I'm a salsa dancer, right? So salsa dancing is a particular kind of dance. There's so many kinds of dance out there, but salsa dancing and other forms of what we call social dance or partner dance, or some people call it ballroom dancing, right? It's a specific kind of art form, because there's a part of the dance where you're dancing solo, but then you're dancing with a partner. Right? Like I'm holding somebody and we're leading, we're following, we're responding to the music. You can dance to music that's being played by a DJ, or you can dance to live music, right? Where there's a live salsa band playing. And there is a magic, there's a chemistry to it. No two dances are ever the same. So when I dance with, I'm making up names here, but if I'm dancing with one woman named Jessica and another one named Mary, the two dances are never going to be the same. Even if I dance with Jessica 100 times, it's never going to be the same, because we're going to be different people. It's going to be a different song. It's going to be a different dance floor. And so there is something beautiful and artistic about that. There's something social about it, right? Like I'm connecting to another human being at a very kind of a human level. There's a physical fitness aspect to it because we're breathing heavy and we're huffing and puffing. So I think dance has this very unique way of bringing people together that no other art form has. And when I talk about this in front of, audiences, when I'm on stages, I tell people dance is the most democratic art form we have because it's not mediated. I have direct access to it with my body. I don't need a paintbrush. I don't need a camera. I don't need a computer. I just need my body. So anybody can do it. You don't have to be good at it, but you do have access to it. So for me, dance is just this really, really vital and unique way of expressing yourself.
Yeah, it's an object that can change the world. No wonder they've added it to the Olympics, break dancing, and I'm sure you know about that.
Yes, absolutely.
Down in Paris last 2024, was it? Or 2022?
So, 2022. And what's wild is that, there was controversy, right? And we were talking about it. And what was authentic breakdancing and who has the right to run, right? And so it can inspire like maybe political conversations, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it also brings the world together, right? Like the Olympics do. So I'm so happy to see that dance is represented in those ways.
Great. Okay, let's get into some identity discussions. Identity, language, and sort of belonging. Your memoir title is unforgettable, isn't it? So I don't speak Spanish, but I understand everything when I'm dancing. What does that sentence reveal about language shame and identity in second and third generation immigrant families?
Is the core topic of this book, which I'm so excited to share with you. So the source of it is my own story. So first I'll start by saying the actual title of the book is also the title of a song that I once performed to when I was part of a dance company. It was the first time I heard the song. And when I heard the lyrics, it isn't really a traditional song. It's salsa music, but on top of the salsa music, it's a spoken word performance. So it's poetry over this salsa music. And the woman is telling a story in the song. She's saying, she says those words, I don't speak Spanish, but I understand everything when I'm dancing. She's talking about what dance does to her, even though she can't speak the language that dance is coming from. So I heard that song 20 years ago, and it made a deep impression on me. So that when it was time for me to write this book, I had to go back to those words. In short, I'm Puerto Rican. I'm born and raised in the Bronx, New York. I'm born and raised to parents who were born and raised in Puerto Rico, but they met in New York City. And like so many migrants and immigrants who come to the United States, and I'm sure that you can identify this with this in London, England, in the UK. I'm sure other people can identify this as well. When you migrate or you immigrate to a new culture, and you're now you now have to interact with the dominant culture, right? Where you came from, you are not the minority. But now you're in this place and you're a political minority, you're a racial minority, you're a linguistic minority, right? There's discrimination. There is marginalization. And my parents experienced that. So when I was born, they didn't want me to experience that same level of discrimination. So they said, we're just going to speak to you. You're just going to learn English. You don't worry about the Spanish. Worry about speaking English well. Go to school and learn English. When you come home, speak English. And they made a choice to not speak to me in Spanish. Now, they spoke to each other in Spanish, but they didn't speak to me in Spanish. So I grew up with a huge chip on my shoulder because I couldn't speak the language of my family. I couldn't speak the language of my extended family and of my extended community. So, I got made fun of for that. And then I decided, okay, well, I'm going to learn how to speak Spanish. And so when I got to high school, I started taking Spanish classes. Then my Spanish sounded like it came from a textbook. So then I got made fun of for not sounding authentically Puerto Rican.
Yeah.
So I was damned if you do, damned if you don't, right, Chuck? Yeah. So the idea is when I started dancing salsa as an adult, because salsa is this very New York, Puerto Rican art form. So when I started dancing salsa, I found this new way to relate to my heritage, to my Puerto Rican heritage. And it wasn't through the spoken language, it was through the language of the body and the language of the music. So when I say I don't speak Spanish, but I understand everything when I'm dancing, it was a new way to be Puerto Rican that didn't require me to speak Spanish fluently, although I could speak some Spanish. What it required, what it revealed to me, I should say, is that there are other ways outside of language to experience your authentic culture and heritage.
Yeah, that is amazing. I like the way you've put it all there, because I definitely can identify with some of those things for sure. Yeah, but because obviously, having grown up in Nigeria, obviously, you're right. I had no issues with meeting people, because I'm meeting my own people, but then when I'm here, it's a bit different. But anyway, moving on. Let's move on to another interesting. So a lot of people growing up, they grow up carrying this strange tension. They belong to a culture emotionally, but not always linguistically, right? Just like you said there. How does that shape a person's confidence and sense of self? How?
Well, it can happen a lot of ways, but I know that we're human. You know what we do as human beings, Chucks? What we do is we are just trained, or maybe it's genetic. I don't know what it is. But one of the first things we do as children is we identify who are our people and who are not our people. Right? Now, some of that comes from our family, and some of that just comes from the way we interact with our world. We want to make strong connections with the people who are like us. Who is our tribe? Who is our family? Who is our in-group? And then if you're outside of that, those are the outsiders. Those are the out-groups. And then we start to create these little pockets. So there are different ways to do that. You can do that culturally. You can do that ethnically. You can do that racially. You can also do that linguistically. You can also do that from language, right? Like the people who speak the same as us are part of our in-group. And so sometimes these things intersect, right? It's not just one thing. It's many things at the same time. So, if you are part of, in my case, if I'm part of an ethnic group like Puerto Ricans in New York, well, you've got Puerto Ricans in New York who speak fluent Spanish. You've got Puerto Ricans in New York who speak no Spanish. You've got Puerto Ricans in New York who speak a little bit, or they speak Spanglish. They can do a few words in Spanish, a few words in English, and they kind of mix them together. And most of the time, that's fine. We all get along just fine. But there are moments where one can feel a real sense of shame because they don't speak the native language. Right? It could be at a family reunion. It can be at a birthday party. It can be at the dinner table. It could be in any number of spaces where you're trying to communicate, especially if it's with an older generation, right? So like if you're trying to speak with your grandmother or your grandfather, and you can't have a conversation with them because they don't speak English and you don't speak Spanish, right? You can feel a real sense of shame around that. You can feel a real sense of loss of, am I really Puerto Rican? Am I authentically Puerto Rican because I can't even communicate with my own family?
Yeah.
People don't talk about this enough. I think people talk about race and ethnicity a lot, but I don't think people talk enough about the burden of language and the baggage that sometimes we can carry because either we don't speak the language of our homeland, or we do speak the language of our homeland, but we can't transmit it to our children. And our children can only speak the language of the dominant culture. So I think that it can be a silent burden. And I think that it intersects with identity and how we see ourselves, and even our sense of self-worth and self-esteem.
It's very interesting. And okay, I'm going to share just a little story about my own self, because I'm trying to, it bothers me a lot about how am I going to teach my children Igbo. Right, so in Nigeria, 3 main languages, out of which you have Igbo, Yoruba, and Hausa, and I speak Igbo very well, having grown up in the area, growing up there, I speak and write and everything. However, my wife, right, despite being Nigerian, both parents grew up in Nigeria and then moved to Italy. However, She was born in America, but she grew up in Italy.
Wow.
So she speaks Italian. She doesn't speak Igbo. Despite being of obviously Igbo race like myself. So this is the challenge now that I have. My wife doesn't speak Igbo. I speak Igbo, and I would love my children to speak. Now, how do I deal with that situation without even being able to at least communicate in the house with my partner? That is very sort of difficult.
You and your wife are the exact people I had in mind when I was writing this book.
Yeah.
Because even though even though I'm talking about my experience in terms of Spanish, when I was giving talks on this prior to writing the book, people were coming up to me who were Chinese, who were Indian, who were Haitian Creole, all saying, I can identify with this too. And so I had people like you and your wife in mind, people who either carry their home language and want to transmit it to their children and maybe feel either a sense of anxiety or pressure or shame. And then, interestingly enough, you and your wife are both Nigerian, but actually, in many ways, you are a bicultural family. So you are ethnically of the same extraction, but you are an Igbo-speaking Nigerian, and your wife is an Italian-speaking Nigerian, right?
Yeah.
So you have some cultural touch points, but you have very different linguistic frameworks. And now you've got how many children do you have?
Not yet.
So you're preparing. So listen, I'm gonna give you some advice. Here's the thing: if you decide to have children, then I think what you and your wife need to come to agreement on is, how do we define authentic Nigerianness, right? Is Nigerianness defined solely by the ability to speak Igbo, or does it live in other aspects of our culture that we can share with our children? Does it live in our food? Does it live in our music? Does it live in our cultural traditions, in our cultural dress and clothing? Does it live in the way we worship? Does it live in the way we interact with our family across not just generations, but across distance? Because I'm sure she might still have family in Italy. You still have family in Nigeria. Like, maybe there's family in the United States. When we visit these places, how are we going to celebrate our identity? Because you're not going to feel it until the first person in your family in Nigeria starts giving you grief about the fact, why don't your kids speak Igbo? You should be embarrassed that your kid doesn't speak Igbo, right? What are they? Do they think they're British citizens now and they don't have to speak Igbo? Right? Like, that's where the pressure is going to come. And so I think you and your wife would have to have some conversations about, what does it mean to be authentically Nigerian in our household? And how do we stand up for that no matter where we go? And the biggest pressure is going to come from your family members. It's going to come from your family in Nigeria, who probably, as an expression of love, want their grandchildren to speak Igbo. It's going to come from your wife's family, who probably like, why they should learn Italian. You can speak Italian. Why don't they speak Italian? So it's going to come from a lot of different places. And so my invitation in this book is for people to let go of that baggage and to find other ways of authentically expressing your heritage.
Yeah, I mean, so that makes this book then perfect for us, and I'm definitely going to get a copy. Yeah, I'm sure you're going to tell us where obviously we can get it.
Absolutely.
And we'll link it in the description below. So guys, check the description of this video for a link to where you can get the book.
That's right.
We'll talk a little bit about that towards the end. Now let's come to dance, language, resistance, and identity again. You've spoken a lot about social dance, especially salsa, as an alternative form of language. What can dance say that words often fail to express?
Ooh, that's a beautiful question. Dance, when I teach middle school children about social dance, we talk about body language, right? Like, I can be speaking to you and I can be honest with you, or I can be dishonest with you, with what I'm saying, right? Like I could be lying to you, and you may not necessarily know that I'm lying to you if I sell you the right way, right?
Yeah.
But the body is more honest. It's hard to lie with your body because your nervous system will give away clues, right? So I can't fake. I mean, you can, I suppose, but you can't really fake happiness. You can't fake. You can put on a fake smile, but even that, science shows that people can tell the difference between a fake smile and an authentic smile.
Yeah.
Right? So the body is even more powerful in that way. So the body can communicate through dance really deep and intense emotions and states of being. Now, what I do also believe about dance is that dance can also change your state. So I have many times gone to a dance social feeling like I really didn't want to be there, or feeling upset, or feeling sad, or feeling depressed about something, but somehow I dragged myself to the dance, and after dancing for 2 hours, left in a completely different state. Because what dance does is it raises not just your heart rate, but your endorphins and all of it shifts rather your mindset and your framework in a way that's positive, in a way that's healing. So I believe that dance, and it doesn't just have to be going out to a salsa club. You could do it around the house. But what I always say, and all of the science backs me up on this, is that once you start moving, you start to feel better. There was research done in Israel at the University of, I think, that showed that dancing for 2 minutes changed your mood more, or more than 2 minutes on a stationary bike. So they're both movement, but dance, because it incorporates music and because music incorporates emotion,
Yeah.
it has more healing property than me just getting on a bike and just riding for 2 minutes, 20 minutes. So I think that we underestimate the power of dance because we tell ourselves stories that, oh, I can't dance, I have 2 left feet, I don't have rhythm, nobody taught me the steps, and nobody's asking you to perform on stage. We're talking about dancing for your health, not dancing for performance.
Yeah, that is so me. I usually tell people I can only dance when I'm filled with the Spirit. And that spirit can be 2 spirits, either the Holy Spirit or maybe I've had a few glasses of wine or something. That's normally what I tell people.
That's right. That's right. And that's why, as I'm sure you know, the word spirit is related to the word inspiration, right? It's the same thing. So this idea of, whether it's the Holy Spirit, whether it's liquid spirits, it's like we are looking for inspiration. And sometimes that inspiration comes from a divine source. But what's beautiful is that God has given us the ability to find our own inspiration through movement. And I think that what I'm inviting people to do in this book is to let go of the feeling, let go of the attachment to looking good. Because when we are attached to looking good, then we get in our own way. But when we learn how to play, we have greater ability to learn. And so for me, the reason why I had a hard time learning Spanish was because I was too focused on sounding good. I was too focused on not making mistakes and looking like I didn't know looking like I didn't know what I was doing. Yeah. When I started dancing salsa, I didn't have those concerns. I didn't worry about how I looked because I knew I was a beginner. I was allowed to be a beginner and to make mistakes. But sometimes when we're dealing with the language of our heritage or of our home country, we're not given the same grace to make mistakes. We're constantly told, oh, you're doing it wrong, you're doing it wrong, you're doing it wrong. And then we shut down. So if you're listening to this podcast, I hope you hear my invitation, which is invite a little bit more play into your life, invite a little bit more willingness to make mistakes, and you'll find yourself being able to learn way more than you ever could.
And that brings me to my next question. Now that you've mentioned play, you've touched on it a little bit, but just maybe in case there are any points you might have not added. Why do you think play and the arts are so undervalued in education? Especially when they're often the fastest route to confidence building and building skills. Why are they underrated?
Here's the thing, Chucks. Think about your own life. When were you the most, and I don't know anything about your childhood, we just met, right? But if I had to take a guess, probably the freest time in your life was from when you were a toddler to when you were 5 years old, because nobody had any expectations that you were supposed to do something, right? Like, imagine if your parents or your loved ones in your life and your family, imagine if they yelled at you every time when you were learning how to walk, you fell down. You would never learn how to walk, right?
Yeah.
You would never learn how to walk. Or when you were learning how to talk, right? You said you grew up speaking Igbo. Imagine if the first words out of your mouth in Igbo, because you said them wrong, you were made fun of. We don't do that with babies. We don't do that with children. We celebrate even their mistakes because we know that they're learning. We know that, okay, yeah, they said it wrong this time, but the next time they're going to say it better. Yes, they fell on their butt this time, but the next time they're going to take 3 steps forward. But yet we reach a certain age and now it's not playful anymore. Now it's not cute anymore. Now you're 7 years old, you should know better. You're 10 years old and you should know better. And there's a certain part of that that's appropriate. But the older we get, the less tolerance society has for the value of play and the value of joy. Now, if you make mistakes as an adult, you just don't get it. It's 3 strikes and you're out, right? And listen, I'm not saying that this applies to everything, right? I don't want my airline pilot making mistakes. I don't want my brain surgeon making a ton of mistakes. I need expertise in those areas. But for other things, play is the best way to learn. And I think our school systems forget that. Our school systems want us to fill in boxes and they want us to get answers right on tests. But that's not the best way to learn. The best way to learn is when we are joyful. And I think that applies to anything. That applies to math, that applies to reading, that applies to dance, that certainly applies to language. So I'm not a neuroscientist, but I know that the neuroscience shows that when we are in play state and we're in flow state, we can access information a lot more than when we're in a more rigid state.
Yeah, that is so true. So true. Kids, that's why, kids are free because they do all sorts of things, and that's, totally agree with you on that one. Obviously, you've worked across education and community leadership. What does the arts teach children that traditional classrooms often fail to teach? Is there anything that people can learn that is more specific?
Absolutely. The arts are a vital part of our education process, and as far as I'm concerned, it should be lifelong. It shouldn't end just because you finish school. I believe that every single human being should be involved in at least one artistic practice for their entire lives. It can be anything. It can be dance. It can be singing. It could be learning how to play an instrument. It could be painting. It doesn't, writing poetry. It doesn't matter. I feel like it is through the arts that we access the spiritual, the emotional, the social. It's what transcends, and it's what makes humans human, I think. So when I talk about arts education specifically, and I don't know what it's like in the UK, but I know that in the United States, we have seen a decline in the investment in arts education over the last couple of generations. I grew up going to public schools where I had access to a full band. So I learned how to play trumpet and I learned how to play saxophone a little bit. We had a full string orchestra in junior high school. We had choirs and choruses and all kinds of things. And those have slowly disappeared, and they've mostly been outsourced to, arts education vendors who might bring a residency in or something. But I think as we've moved towards high stakes testing, I think as we've moved towards more sort of, STEM and science and technology and math, and those things are important. I'm not suggesting that children shouldn't get a high quality science and math, and we need all those things too. But I believe that arts education is where we get in touch with our humanity, and just as importantly, where we get to connect to others and find that other aspect of ourselves. Children who have high quality arts education stay in school longer. They do better in their academics. They do better with their social skills. They have better emotional regulation because they have these outlets.
I agree.
Right? So when we take that away, or when we minimize it and we don't give children the opportunity to find artistic outlets, they don't do better in school. Like the data proves that. So it's almost like we're cutting off our nose to spite our face. Well, let's double down on academics. But actually, your academics will improve if the kids have these artistic outlets. So I think that whether you're a student, in primary school or secondary school, or you're an adult, our life outcomes are better when you have artistic expression and artistic practice. So I believe that it's vital for humanity.
Yeah, it's got to be. It's got to be. Let's move on to immigration, politics, race, and the American experience. For Latino like you. In the beginning, I talked about the fact that you sit in the intersection of these four things: immigration, language, race, and politics, right? So then, in your view, what do people still misunderstand about the Latino experience in America?
Well, it's a loaded question because I can't speak for the entire Latino experience in America, and that's the problem. Because Latinos in the United States are incredibly diverse. They come from over 23 countries in Latin America, and the Caribbean, as well as in the United States. We have different relationships to our home countries, to the Spanish language, to our historical relationship to Spain, and all of these other things. What I will say is that Spanish was the first language spoken in the United States. People forget that. Right? It was because the British came and eventually took everything over that we forget actually the Spanish, at least in terms of the colonial powers. There were already indigenous people here before the colonial powers got here. But if we're talking about European colonization, the first European colonizers were the Spanish. So Spanish was spoken here 100 years before the English got here. So we had huge swaths of the Caribbean and what is the western and southern United States and Mexico and Florida and all, people were speaking Spanish. So that when we political people today who say, you're in the United States, speak English, they're forgetting that part of the history, that Spanish was here way before English was. And Spanish culture was here way before kind of British and Western European culture was here. But then the other thing is that Spanish itself is a colonizing language. So it's the history of this part of the world is very complicated and nuanced. And so for Puerto Ricans in particular, because that's what I am, I'm Puerto Rican, Puerto Rico has this very unique relationship with the United States. It is described as the world's oldest colony, because whereas other Caribbean nations got their independence either from the United States or from Britain or France or the Dutch or Portugal, Puerto Rico is still a possession, a territory of the United States. And even though in the 1950s that changed with this new political identity called the Commonwealth or the Free Associated State, where Puerto Rico was given a certain amount of limited government autonomy, there still is a colonial relationship with the United States because Puerto Rico cannot act independent of the United States Congress. People in Puerto Rico cannot vote for the presidency of the United States. There is still this economic dependence on the United States. So even though Puerto Ricans are United States citizens by birthright, and we have free access, to the mainland, unlike other Latinos from the Dominican or anywhere else, we don't need a passport to go to the United States. Still, there is this very fraught political relationship. And so when you look at the history of Puerto Rican migration from Puerto Rico to the northeastern United States primarily, and then eventually other parts of the country, there was this real strong tension between people having real pride about being Puerto Rican and speaking Spanish and representing Puerto Rican culture, but for economic reasons, having to leave Puerto Rico and make a living in the United States, like so many other immigrants. The difference is that whereas people who've immigrated from other countries still have this sort of independent national identity, Puerto Ricans have this difficult relationship because there's still the national identity and the nationalist fervor, but then there's also this, but I'm also a United States citizen and I also have to make my home here. And so when you expand that over many generations, over 500,000 Puerto Ricans migrated to the United States mainland between the 1940s and the 1970s. So you have this huge Puerto Rican diaspora now in the United States as well as in Puerto Rico. And it's complicated because there are people who are like me who are fiercely Puerto Rican, but who have almost zero relationship to the island of Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
Right? Because I've gone there on vacation, but I've never lived there. I certainly don't speak Spanish fluently, but I still have a very high level of pride about being Puerto Rican. So what does it mean to be Puerto Rican in a land that is also colonizing Puerto Rico? It's a very difficult relationship, and it's one that people are still wrestling with even decades later. And so it's the intersection of race, politics, migration policy, and language, and it's fascinating. So I address these things in the book because they're really important, because you can't talk about language and identity without talking about the political realities of where you come from. Yeah.
Of course. And to be fair, you've taken me to school actually with some facts, some historical facts. I wouldn't have known that the Spanish actually came to America first, many years before the British came, and I would have known that. And also, obviously, this dynamic about Puerto Rico and America and the Latino. So guys, I'm very sure a lot of you as well have learned something today. So make sure you go and check out this book by Rodney. Go and check out this book. Get a copy for yourself, especially if you're someone like us who are immigrants, who are children of immigrants, as the case may be. There's always something to learn from this. So just a few questions now, maybe two before you round up for us, right?
Yeah.
What would you say to someone who feels, and a lot of people are in this boat, on this table, as they say, what would you say to someone who feels caught between worlds, right? Too American for one space or too ethnic for another? What would you say to that person?
Man, that's such a great question, and it's such a difficult one to answer because that experience is so personal, right? It's going to look different for me than it's going to look for you because we have different. I'm sure there are certain human values that you and I share, but we might have different cultural values. We might have different family values. We might have different religious values, right? So it's a very personal question, but I think the way I would answer it is, first of all, recognizing that there's no one right way to be, right? Like there's no one definitive way to be Nigerian. There's no one definitive way to be Puerto Rican, right? There are multiple ways to express your Nigerianness. And if you're what we call a hyphenated person, right? So like if you're Nigerian American, Nigerian Italian, right? Like if you have Nigerian heritage, but you also have like a national identity somewhere else outside of Nigeria, for instance, that's a really interesting pull because something brought you to the new country. Now, maybe you didn't want to be in the new country, right? Like maybe you were forced there because of difficult circumstances. Maybe you're a refugee. Maybe there was economic or political turmoil in your home country and you had to leave, right? You didn't want to, you had to. Well, that's different, right? That's a different relationship, right? Some people leave just because they don't have to leave, but they want a different experience, or they want to be able to make more money or get an education, or some people leave because they have a job and their company says, we want you to work in this other country. We have an office out there, and then you fall in love with the place and you don't want to leave. So we all have different reasons and then like you said, maybe our grandparents came for economic reasons, but now it's 3 generations later and you're just born there. Like you didn't have a choice. So each one of those experiences are different, but that means each of us have to have a personal decision to make. What does it mean for me to be authentically Nigerian, to be authentically Indian or Chinese? Or am I okay with a hyphenated identity? Is it okay for me to be Chinese American or British Chinese, right? Whatever that means. And is it okay for me to sit in 2 different identities? Because a lot of times what happens, Chucks, is we actually change the way we talk about ourselves depending on the context we're in. So if you're sitting at a table with if you're sitting at a party with a bunch of Nigerians, right? It's different than if you're sitting at a table in a multiracial, multi-ethnic place. You're going to identify differently. In one space, you might identify by where your passport is, right? Or where your citizenship is. But in another space, you might identify by where you are ethnically or culturally. And so all of that is okay. We have to wear different hats depending on where we are. That's just what it means to live in a global society, especially one that's mobile, right? But my invitation to people is that's okay to wear different hats. Just don't let somebody else dictate to you what authenticity looks like. That's where we get into trouble. Because if I'm Puerto Rican in one space and I'm New York in another space, but I'm Afro-Latino in another space and I'm American in another space, I can be all of those things.
Mm-hmm. It's okay.
But it's okay. But you don't get to tell me what I am. I get to say what I am. And you always have that right as a human being. And listen, I'd be lying if I said sometimes that doesn't drive you crazy, or I'd be lying if I said, like, you know, when you get the census every 10 years and you have to check off your box, what are you ethnically? And you have to check, am I black? Am I white? Am I this? Am I that? Or on a job application, you have to make certain whatever. That can be difficult. That can be frustrating because you don't fit in any of the boxes. But that's the government systems or the business systems dictating that to you.
Doesn't define you.
That doesn't define who you are and define your human value. So I just invite people to say, okay, if I have to check a box for a job application, that's one thing. But if I walking through the world, I get to define, I get to name who I am, not the dominant culture.
Yeah. Awesome. Very, very wonderful. Honestly, it's been a wonderful conversation, and I personally learned a lot, and I'm sure, guys, let us know in the comment section below what is it that you're taking away from Rodney's sort of from this episode today. What is it? Let us know in the comment section below. Don't forget that if you have any questions, put in there, and I'll get it across to Rodney.
Yes, please.
Thank you so much again for coming. If you look back at your younger self, what is it you wish you understood sooner about culture, language, and self-worth? That's the first one. And then secondly, what is the legacy that you would like to leave behind?
I'm laughing because when you see the book, you'll see that on the cover, it's a picture of me when I was 4 years old. And I really thought long and hard about the cover of my book. When you write a book, the cover, they say don't judge a book by its cover, but also the cover is you have one chance to make a first impression, right? So if somebody's seeing the book, you have to put a lot of thought into what you want that first statement to be. And I put a picture of myself. It's the only picture I have of myself as a child dancing. And if I were to, and I was 4 years old in that picture. And if I could go back to that 4-year-old, right, I think what I would tell him is, you are okay the way you are. You are going to go through your adolescence, through your 20s, and even your 30s and early 40s, questioning if who you are is good enough. Because this is what humanity is about. It's about that search, and sometimes it takes 20 years, right? But if I could tell that 4-year-old Rodney, what I would say is, listen, don't sweat it. You'll make mistakes in life, but you're never not going to be enough of something. You are completely 100% worthy of love and acceptance, no matter who you are. No matter whether you speak Spanish or not, no matter whether you graduate from college or not, no matter whether you've got a good job, no matter whether you worship the right way. Like, there is nothing that makes you less worthy of love and acceptance.
Yeah.
So I think that is the takeaway. I hope that's the takeaway of this experience for me, and I hope that's what the takeaway is when people read this. Like legacy is that everybody has a contribution to make. Everybody's story matters, and I want to leave behind a legacy of inviting people into a space where they can get healing. And in my particular case, the healing comes through dance and through like cultural wellness, in the sense of being really digging into whatever your culture is and finding that wholeness. And for me, it's dance. For somebody else, it might be food, right? Like, somebody else can write a book, I don't speak Spanish, but I understand everything when I'm cooking, right? Like, maybe food is their way to find wholeness. For me, it was salsa dancing. So my legacy is, what I hope my legacy is, other than my children, is a legacy of a life of service and a life inviting people into finding their purpose through the arts.
Awesome. It's, honestly, obviously the story has really, it's really open, right? It opens up the powerful conversation about that Latino identity, immigration, language, education, cultural healing. And I think all of the audience today, guys, whether you share the background or not, I'm very sure you're seeing yourself somewhere in this story. Honestly, Rodney, it has been a beautiful conversation.
Yes.
It's been full, it's been layered, and it's been deeply, deeply human.
Yeah, thank you.
So tell us then about the book.
Thank you for the space to do that. So my book is being released very soon. It will be available online at all online booksellers in the coming days, at least at the time of this recording. So since I can't give you the link to the sales page, what I'm going to invite everybody to do is to find me on my website, right? So the link I want to share with you is, and I know Chucks will put it in the show notes, but it's www. And it's just my name, RodneyEricLopez.com/book. And so when you go to RodneyEricLopez.com/book, you're going to be able to do two things. And I want you to do one thing first and then do something else second, right? So the first thing I want you to do is I want you to sign up for my mailing list, which is just going to be a mailing list about the book. If you want to sign up for my general mailing list, you can do that on a different page. But I want you to sign up for my book mailing list. I'm going to be giving people behind the scenes information and background information on the book and other kinds of things. And I would just like you to join my I don't speak Spanish community. Even if you do speak Spanish or if you speak another language, it doesn't matter. I'd like you to join my community. And then when the book becomes available online, at that same link, you'll also be able to order your copy as well. So if you go to that page and bookmark it, you'll be able to go back and buy the book. And then it'll eventually, in the next few days, it'll be available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and all the other things. But we're just finishing up the background stuff right now. But join my mailing list because I'd love to be in community with you.
Yeah, obviously, what you share today reminds us that identity is not just about, it's not always spoken. Sometimes it's also danced, right? Sometimes it's carried in memory, in reading, in family, in shame. and in the long road, back to belonging. Thank you so much for coming on the Curious Tycoon Podcast and for bringing both honesty and depth in this conversation. And guys, to you all, you guys have been my ride or die. Thank you so much for listening. And don't keep what you've learned today. Share it with someone. Share it with someone who is still trying to find language for who they are. And until next time, stay curious, stay bold, keep building with purpose. Don't forget to like, comment, and share this video to anyone who you think that it will be beneficial to. And take care, goodbye, and God bless. Until next time, bye guys.